The Timeshift.
Hello and welcome, I'm Chris Hall and this is The Timeshift. My sci-fi fun person, it's great to have you with me as always. Tonight, looking at the latest episode of Doctor Who entitled Sleep No More. And because this video is a little bit of a critique review kind of thing, this video is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you don't want this episode spoiled for you for whatever reason, it's best to switch the video off now. Okay, everybody ready, everybody geared up, let us dive headfirst into Sleep No More. Okay, so Sleep No More, not the Doctor Who Nightmare on Elm Street crossover that we'd all been hoping. I mean, the Doctor fighting Freddy Krueger, blimey, what a matchup that would be. We didn't quite get that, but what we got was perfectly fine for what it was. I mean, I had no issues with this week's episode in quite the same way in which I've had issues with the past couple weeks' episodes. I mean, this episode at least functioned like a real piece of fiction. All the dots and all the dashes were in the right places. It's just that this week's episode was in certain key areas. One of the things I really did enjoy about this episode was its ending. That's not to say that I was glad when it was over, but that whole ending sequence was just sublime, perfectly dark, wonderful, brilliantly pitch black, horrible, and brilliant. I mean, I honestly didn't expect them to do that. I honestly didn't expect them to effectively suggest that someone's got one over in the Doctor, but I think it's brilliant. And apparently they may do a sequel to this week's episode, maybe next series, which I'd be perfectly fine with. Maybe not using the found footage thing, because that is the area where I had the biggest problems with this week's episode. And as that was pretty much the whole crux of this week's episode, this episode for me didn't quite function as it really should have done. Flawed is the word that I use to describe this week's episode, as once again, it's not a bad episode. It didn't make me angry, vengeful, or venomous. It just kind of did its job quite efficiently. There were some interesting ideas within it. I mean, the idea of humanity effectively trying to beat sleep and the ramifications that could have, I thought to be interesting. I would just preferred it had it not been done in such a Doctor Who-y way, which feels like a very odd thing to say in correlation with an episode of Doctor Who, but exploring the idea of trying to beat sleep, the physical and mental impacts that they could have on somebody, I find a lot more interesting than the Doctor fighting monsters that look like they're made out of porridge in the dark. I mean, whilst that is fine for an episode of Doctor Who, I would have much preferred something a little bit more with substance, something we can actually go away with and actually explore on a cerebral level. Something that actually has some subtlety to it, some nuance to it, unlike certain episodes we've had recently. Though, of course, the big issue that I have with this episode is its mere construction. The ultimate issue that I have with this week's episode isn't the fact that certain themes weren't explored in the way that I would have liked them to, or the idea that it's just the Doctor fighting weird sand monsters. It's the fact that this episode, for me at least, felt like a lot of build-up and not much payoff. All through this episode, it's this constant ratcheting up of tension, as effectively as you can ratchet up tension in a pre-Watershed show. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it didn't really amount to anything. There's this distinct feeling at the back of my mind at any moment we're going to get a jump scare, or we're going to get some really disturbing image, but at the end of the day, we really didn't. And any attempt to actually have anything like that kind of fell on its face. Not due to a bad directing standpoint or any kind of bad pacing, but at the end of the day, just due to some really weird choices of camera angles. The best example that I can give to help illustrate this issue that I have comes from when the first character is killed off. That scene starts off with a point of view shot. Then it cuts for whatever reason to a shot from behind him, like there's a camera on the wall or something, and then it goes back to a point of view shot for him to turn around and get off. I understand that what we're supposed to be seeing in this episode isn't as the result of really security cameras or helmet cams or anything like that, but it's as a result of the weird sleepy eye sand stuff. And as a result, that some of the angles and some of the shots that we're going to be seeing is just going to be collected particles of that scattered here, there, and everywhere. So not everything we're seeing is necessarily a point of view shot. I can accept that. But that mere change from going from point of view to a camera just situated weirdly in a weird camera angle of the room, I just that just derails the whole scene for me. It doesn't kill it, it just kind of manhandles it ever so slightly. It's like the CD skipping. It just kind of takes something out of that moment, so that when he does get killed off, I don't feel like oh wow, that's scary. It's more of a, oh right, he's dead now. I understand why that change of angle was there. It was to cover up an edit point. It was so they can wheel the monster out behind the guy, so we don't see the reflection in the glass ahead of time, so we don't have the effect spoilt for us. But the mere change that angle does ruin that effect for me. The whole found footage idea is like this sense of hyper-reality. You are literally putting the audience in the shoes of the characters in whatever situation this may be. They are seeing whatever's going on in the eyes of the people that are within the scene, in grim, horrific detail. Cutting away to cameras which have no logical reason to exist within this whole construct damages that sense of immersion. And yes, whilst it's kind of explained away later on that what we're seeing as a result of all the weird Sandman particles floating about, that still doesn't stop these weird cutaways from damaging the scenes that they are in. Cutting to other characters' point of view or to security camera footage is fine because you're still maintaining that sense, that illusion of immersion, of intimacy. But as soon as you cut away to a camera angle or a point of view which has no real physical, logical reason to exist, immediately then any kind of intimacy is killed stone dead. We go from being in this moment with this character who's terrified about the possibility they may meet their end at the hand of this strange alien entity to something else, and then we're back again where we're slightly confused, and the whole impact of him getting off kind of doesn't quite land as really it should do. And as a result, that tension isn't released, it just sits there. And it just keeps to building up from there. This whole cycle, this whole building up of tension keeps going on and on and on, which means by the end of this episode, we feel very on edge, we feel very irritated. It's like wanting to sneeze, this weird tickly feeling at the back of our throat. We need release, we want something to come out and really scare us to make good this tension, but it doesn't. We get to the end of the episode and we feel slightly irritated. We get a fantastic ending, an ending which is wholly undeserving of this episode, and we just kind of scratch around wondering why it is we aren't more scared than we really are. And the reason is because this whole function, this whole illusion of any kind of reality is killed stone dead by the simple changing of camera angles, at least in my own humble opinion. Now, to be fair, it does feel as though they genuinely wanted to make a found footage episode of Doctor Who, to use that construct to create this sense of hyper-reality, to really scare the audience, to put them into some horrifically uncomfortable situations, but sadly, due to editing, due to weird camera points, it kind of malforms that. And we get this weird sense, or at least I get this weird sense, that whilst they really wanted to make this episode, they were a little bit unsure how to do it, or they lacked the skill or the necessary know-how to make it, which sadly means that Unfriended functions as a better found footage horror movie than this does. And I never thought I'd ever say anything positive about Unfriended in my entire life. I feel a bit woozy now. Oh dear, I think we should just skip into the performance section, which is going to be rather short because, oh dear. Okay, so performance is very, very short. Everybody bar the Doctor and Clara was fine. This episode is, when we get down to brass tacks of it, fairly bloody average once we get away from the whole found footage thing not really working. Performance-wise, Peter Capaldi once again stole the show. They gave him more speeches, more moments to really, I wouldn't say chew the scenery, but to really get his fingernails dirty into the character of the Doctor. Clara was there. I think just the honeymoon period is genuinely over now. I can't be at all interested or excited by Clara Oswald as a character anymore. The extras were fine. The evil doctor guy who turned into a sand person was fine for the brief periods he was in. I think the caption stuff that was appearing on the screen when he was talking about the survival rating of certain characters was a bit much for my liking, but it was fine. Anyway, let's just skip this bit, this whole facade of talking about performance, and just go into the overview. Okay, so overview, this episode was fine. That's all it was, fine. It wasn't terrible, it was fine. Like I say, I have issues with it. The whole physical construct, the whole attempt to make a found footage episode just fell apart for the sake of one sodding camera. Well, it wasn't one camera angle. It happened multiple times in the episode when it really, really shouldn't do. I mean, I don't want to talk about it any more than I have done because I've done that whole conversation several times. That's why there's so many bloody edit points in it. But it was fine. I did get this weird sense that it felt a little bit too FPS for me. There was this weird moment which during this episode, the absolute worst, it felt like one of those bad 1990s CD video games. I mean, Jesus Christ. Anyway, I know that makes me sound 110 years old because I even got the name of it wrong, but whatever. What did you think about this week's episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section in whichever website, web zone that you're watching this on, and I shall probably read you out next week, or maybe directly comment to you directly. Oh, dear me, I think I was a bit delirious over that whole saying something nice about Unfriended. Oh, and I'm also a little bit hungry, so that also doesn't help matters at all. So I'm going to disappear off into that sweet good night. As next week we have Riggsy back. Yay! Everybody loves him, and he might die with this week's episode, which I really hope not because I like that character. I don't mind it if he became the new companion, but whatever. And apparently it's me, a Shielder, is back next week. So anyway, I will be next week. Doctor Who things. Goodbye.